Good morning, everyone. So, today I come here with another lecture, and today we are going to discuss about the mechanical properties of various materials that we can obtain from the concept of stresses and strain. So, let us talk about mechanical properties of mechanical properties of materials. Okay, now having developed and discussed about the basic concept of stresses and strain, we will see in this lecture that how the stresses can be related to strain by using various type of experimental methods in order to determine a special type of diagram that is normally used for designing of different materials, and we call that diagram as stress strain diagram for any type of specific material. Right now we will also see how these stress strain diagram can be used to evaluate different mechanical properties of materials which are used in different design calculations of various type of machine structures and machine components. Also, we are going to discuss about the mechanical properties and other different tests that can be related to the development of the mechanics of material. So the first common type of test that we normally use to evaluate the basic properties of different type of materials is the tension and the compression test, right? We discuss about the tension and compression test, right? So we will just start this lecture with a concept of tensile or tension test, and we will see what are the various mechanical properties that are associated or that can be obtained for different type of material using these tests. Okay, now see the first, remember one basic point. All these type of tests which are used to evaluate the different mechanical properties of a material can be actually decided on the basis of two type of materials. One is for the ductile materials, right? One is for the ductile materials and another one for the brittle materials, right? So right now we are going to talk about the behavior of ductile materials and what are the various mechanical properties that are associated with ductile materials which we obtain from a tension test. See, please remember one thing. I hope you guys are aware about the definition of ductile and brittle materials. See, tensile test or we can say tension tests are normally used to calculate the properties of ductile materials, while the compression tests are normally used to evaluate the stress strain behavior, or we can say compression tests are used to find out the mechanical properties of brittle materials. So right now we will be confining our discussion on the ductile materials and we will later take on the mechanical behavior of brittle materials. So right now the most common thing that comes in our mind while we talk about the tension and compression test. What is that common question? What is the purpose of using these type of tests? Why do we do these tests? What is the purpose? What is the aim behind it, right? What is the purpose and what is the aim behind it? Normally the main purpose of doing any type of testing on a material is to find out the overall strength of a material, is to find out the overall strength of the material. Okay, overall strength of the material. Now, what do we mean by this term overall strength of a material? The overall strength of a material is nothing but this term. Let us use the red sign. Let us use this term. strength of material, we means that it is actually the ability of a material, it is the ability of a material, it is defined as the ability of a material to sustain a load, right? To sustain a load, to sustain a load without showing any sign of visible deformations, right? Without showing any undue deformations, or we can say strains, or we can say failure also. Undue deformations slash failure. So that is the main purpose of performing the different type of test, and our main criteria is to find out the overall strength of a material. And later on we will see that how this overall strength of a material can be used to find out the various mechanical properties of different of these type of ductile materials. Now normally what we find out from this tensile test is a conventional stress strain relationship between, for many engineering materials like metals, ceramic, polymers and composite materials, right? So let us talk about the let us talk in brief about the concept of tensile testing and what are the different types of specimens that we normally use in performing the tensile test, right? So let us assume that for the sake of our simplicity, let me save this. Mechanical properties of materials. Let us say P1. Okay, so let us talk about the basics of tension test. See, normally what happens, in order to perform any tension test on the specimen, we actually prepare a specimen having some standard shape and size. Now the question here is, what are the different type of sizes and shapes that we can prepare a material from a material to do the tensile test. Let us take the example of a steel material. We want to evaluate the mechanical properties of steel material and how we can obtain the stress strain diagram using tension test. Okay, so there are two types of specimen shapes that are normally used to perform the tensile test. One is the dog bone shape specimen, right? One is your dog bone shape specimen. The other specimen is your cylindrical shaped specimen. Cylindrical shaped specimen. Now, diagrammatically, dog bone actually looks like this. It actually looks like this. There is a reduction in area at this point. It's again look like this. Okay, now see, if you see this, this is being divided into three regions. One region is this, from this to this. One region is from, let us say, this point to this point, and the another third region is this. Oops, sorry. And the other third region is this. Let us say we call this as region number 1, region number 2 and region number 3. Now this region number 1, see, normally a dog bone shape specimen has a rectangular cross section. Please remember this. It has got a rectangular cross section. Okay. it has got a rectangular cross section. Now, this region number 1 and 3, we call it as gripped points. Region number 1 and 3, not 2. We call it as gripped points. Okay. We call it as gripped points. Now, what are these grip points? These are those points which actually goes into the gripper of the machine which perform a tensile test. Now, that type of machines which you might have already know about it, the various types of the commonly used machine that performs the tension test in order to evaluate the mechanical properties for any material is UTM. We call it as universal tensile testing machine, right? We call it as universal tensile testing machine. We call it as universal tensile testing machine. So now what about this region number 2? Region number 2 is nothing but your gripped length. Now this gripped length is a length where we actually observe the failure. We actually observe or assume the failure to take place within this length. But in order to mark more accurately, what we do, we just put two dots like this. Let us say we just put two dots like this, and we name this as dot number A and dot number B. So this length between dots A and B, we call this as the gauge length. And a gauge length is a length where we assume that during the test the failure of the specimen will be taking place within this 2 points A and B, and this length will be used in the evaluation of strains, right? So this point AB, we call it as gauge length. I hope now the gauge length is clear to everyone. Gauge length is now clear to everyone. So this is a dog bone shaped specimen that is normally used to perform the tensile testing of steel materials. The another commonly used material is the cylindrical shaped material, and it actually looks like this. It somewhat looks like this. Again, there is a reduction in area. See, normally this reduction in area is associated with some fillet so that the stresses should not concentrate at one point, and if we introduce a fillets here, so the transfer of stresses from this point to from this region to this region will be very smooth, and we will be getting the associated failure within this gauge length of the specimen. So we will see this is a cylindrical specimen. Normally, according to the standards that are normally used to perform the test using the cylindrical specimen, the initial diameter or the diameter that is normally used in preparing the tensile test of steel materials is diameter is about 13 millimeter, right? And gauge length, which we call it as LG or L naught, we call it as L naught, is roughly about 50 millimeters, which means that let us say if we name these 2 points, point number 1 and point number 2. So this is nothing but your gauge length which will be using in evaluation of a strain. We call it as GL. GL stands for gauge length here, and the diameter of this cross section from point 1 to 2 is 13 millimeter. Now again, as we have discussed previously, these are the regions which goes into the gripper of a machine. Normally in UTM, in the grip region, we use ball and socket joints, which has got some initial threads inside or grooves inside it. So we normally use ball and socket joints. So that is the reason, in order to fit this specimen into the ball and socket joints of the grippers of the universal tensile testing machine, we actually in cylindrical specimens we make some initial grooves which matches with the grooves of balls and socket joints like this, right? So this is a standard typical cylindrical shaped specimen that is normally used in performing the tensile test of a specimen. Now in the UTM, along with the grippers, there are load cells attached like this. either one or two load cells, let us say load cell number 1, load cell number 2, which is normally used to record the loads that is being calculated by the load cells when the machine is moving or stretching the specimen. See, one gripper, it will move in this direction with a velocity v1, and another, sorry, this equal velocity we give to it, and the other gripper will move in this direction with velocity v, right? So there, due to these velocities, so there will be some load that is being produced in produced by this specimen, which is being produced due to the deformation of this specimen. So that load cells will be recorded by load cell number L1 and L2. So these load cells values will be used in the evaluation of stresses that is being produced in this specimen. So load cell values are used in the calculation of stresses. They are used in calculation of stresses. Okay. So these are normally used in the calculation of stresses. Now the next question is, what about strain? The question here is, what about strain? How do we measure it? See, we have already discussed that we use gauge length in the evaluation of a strain. So there are two methods of calculating strains in this from the tensile test. One is we attach external devices to the surface of these specimens, and those devices we call it as extensometer. One specimen is the one device is the extensometer. The other commonly used device that measures the strain directly, we call it as strain gauges. Okay, we call it as strain gauges. Okay, now first let us talk a very brief about the extensometer. See, extensometer is a optical type, is normally optical type of extensometer, and there are electrical type of extensometer also. So what we do, we attach, let us say we attach a extensometer like this, in this way, to these 2 points, point number A and B, and whenever this gripper moves in this direction and this gripper moves in this direction, so there will be a change in the relative positions of these 2 points A and B. So whatever we actually extensometer calculate these changes in the position of these 2 points A and B, and these changes in displacement we call it as elongation. So extensometers are normally used to measure the elongation of the specimens in the tensile test. Now, after you calculate this elongation, you divide these values of elongation by gauge length, you will get strain. So strain is nothing but delta L, which is the change in the length over L. So that is how you calculate the strain using the extensometer. Now what about strain gauges? See, strain gauges are small electrical type of instruments which are actually used to measure the strain on the basis of change in electrical resistance of a piece of very thin wire or on a piece of metallic foil which is subjected to strain during the movement of a specimen in the universal tensile testing machine. Normally what happens, this type of strain gauge is stick to the surface of a specimen along its gauge length, right? So it actually measures the electrical resistance or the change in electrical resistance, and that change in electrical resistance is nothing but strains of the specimen. So the actually electrical strain gauge somewhat looks like this. It somewhat looks like this. This is a very small chip. It is being attached here, and you can directly stick this chip to the surface of the specimen or the points where you want to measure the strains. So this change in electrical resistance along this positive and negative point will directly give you the value of strains, right? Now let me save this as P2. Okay, so now let us try to see See what we have got here. We have got load from here. We have got either elongation using the extensometer, or we have got strain using the strain gauges. Now the next thing is to calculate the stresses and strain on the basis of these values. So how do we are going to do that? See, whenever we prepare the specimen, we take some initial measurements before we mount our specimen to the tensile testing machine. So what are those initial values? One I have already discussed. One of the basic measurement is to measure the gauge length of the specimen, right? One is the gauge length of the specimen. One is the gauge length of the specimen, okay? Which is used in the evaluation of strain. So we take these measurements initially, or we can say before starting of the test. So we call it as GL, gauge length. The another most common measurement that we usually take is the cross-sectional, measure the cross-sectional area of the specimen. Cross-sectional area. See, for the cylindrical specimen, it will be pi by 4 into di, which is the initial diameter square. Okay, so now we have got, let us say P is the amount of a load that is being calculated during the tension test, let us say PT, and epsilon is the amount, let us say E is the elongation, or we can say delta L is the elongation of the specimen during the test, assuming we are using extensometer. Now we have got these measurements with us. Now the measurement, we will calculate our stresses like this. Sigma is nothing but PT upon this area of cross section. We call it as initial area because we have measured before starting of a test. So this will give you the measure of stresses during the, that is being developed in the specimen during the tension test. And another one will be epsilon, which is, as I have already told you, this is measurement of elongation divided by the total gauge length. It will give you the, it will give you the measurement of strains. Now see, now please remember one more thing. Our conventional stress strain diagram are actually based on engineering stresses. They are actually based on engineering stresses and engineering strains. Now the question here is, what do we mean by this term engineering stresses and engineering strains? So these terms are nothing but, these terms are nothing but this is nothing but the values of stresses and strains that we calculate on the basis of this initial measurement. Because in the tensile test, there is one assumption that area remains constant throughout the test. This is a basic assumption. Area remains constant throughout the test, but practically we will see this will not be applicable. But this is just a basic assumption. So on the basis of initial area, the measurement of stresses, we call it as engineering stresses, and on the basis of initial gauge length, we call that strain measure as engineering strain. Most of the conventional stress strain diagram based on for different materials are actually based on engineering stresses and engineering strain. Okay, so now this engineering stresses, we denote this by sigma E, and it is nothing but, it is again equal to this value, initial area. Similarly, epsilon E is engineering strain, which is delta L upon L. So now, having measured all these values, we will get a special type of diagram from a machine, and that we call it as stress strain diagram for steel material. Now how do it looks like? It actually somewhat looks like this. Let us draw a conventional stress strain diagram, and then let us try to understand the basic behavior of stress strain curve. Okay, so I will be using different colors. So let us say, Okay, so let us draw the conventional stress strain diagram of steel material. It will actually somewhat looks like this. We will draw x and y axis first. Okay, I'm just drawing a very large line on x-axis. On y-axis we plot sigma, on x-axis we plot epsilon, right? So let us say we start our curve from origin and we name this as point number 0. So there will be a straight line in the initial level, there will be a straight line, and here comes a first point. Let us name this as point number 1. Then there is somewhat little bit curve, it will bend and it follows like this, and here it will comes point number 2. Again there will be a complete bending here, and here comes point number 3. So it will actually follows a constant line, and here comes point number 4. And after this material will, the curve will go like this. It becomes horizontal for some time and it reaches its maximum capacity at point number 5, and after 5 the load begin to reduce and it fails at point number 6. Now what are these points? Point 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on this curve. So let us name it here. Point number 1 we call it as proportional limit. Point number 1 we call it as proportional limit. Okay, so please make sure about all these things. Point number 2 is nothing but it is your elastic limit. It is your elastic limit. Point number 3, it is your yield point. It is your yield point. Point number 3 is nothing but your yield point. Now point number 4 we call it as strain hardening point. I will explain you what do we mean by this term strain hardening. We call it as strain hardening point. We call it as strain hardening point. Now point number 5 is a point where the material reaches its maximum capacity of carrying the load. So that we call it as ultimate tensile strength point. We call it as UTS. If you have heard about this term, we call it as ultimate tensile strength. Okay, we call this as ultimate tensile strength. Point number 6 is your fracture, or we can say failure point. Failure slash fracture point. Okay, so now let us discuss all these points one by one in order to understand what actually happens in this region and what are the possible mechanisms that give rise to these points. Okay, so first let us talk about point from 0 to 1. Point 0 to 1 we call this point, so from 0 to 2, this total region we call it as elastic region. Okay, we call this point as elastic region, and this elastic region consists of 2 points. Point number 1 we call it as proportional limit. We call this as proportional limit. And point number 2 we call it as elastic limit. Okay, so let us try to make this here, this region from 0 to 2, we call it as elastic region. All right, we call it as elastic region. Now what happens in this, what is this elastic region and what happened under this region? See, elastic region actually represents the elastic behavior of a material. Now this behavior actually occurs when the strains that is being developed in the specimens follows a linear relationship with stresses up till point number 2, right? So that region where the stresses that is being produced in the specimen during the tension test follows a linear relationship with strain developed in the material. Or in other words, what we can say, if you have loaded the material up till point number 1, which is the proportional limit, and as soon as you reach up till point number 1 and from point number 1 you unload this material, they will follow the same path and the material will regain its position completely, and the material will regain its initial position completely. So up till point number 1, up till proportional limit, stresses follows a linear relationship. Stresses are directly proportional to strains, right? Or we can say stresses follows a linear relationship with strain. Okay, now as soon as you increase the applied load in the tensile testing machine, right, as soon as if you just slightly increases the value and this value exceeds the proportional limit, the curve will actually not follows a straight line completely. Instead, it shows somewhat a little type of bending, and after bending it will try to flatten out till it reaches point number 2. But here, this point number 2, we call it as elastic limit. Now why do we call it as elastic limit? Since you will ask me here that, sir, from between point and to point 1 and 2 the curve is getting bended first and then it is flattening. It is because even at point number 2, whatever the load that you have applied up till point number 2, let us call it as sigma E. Whenever you remove this load, again the material has got a capacity to regain its original position without showing any visible sign of failure in it. So that region up till where the body regain its original position upon the removal of forces, we call that region as elastic limit. Okay, now see, please remember that for elastic materials, for steel materials, point 1 and 2 are actually identical. Now, why they are identical? Because proportional limit is very close to the elastic limit. So that is the reason for elastic material. We define that up till proportional limit, the stresses induced in the material is directly proportional to strain. Okay, and we call this law as Hooke's law. So oftenly, Hooke's law is a law which states that within the proportional limit, or we can sometimes, since for a steel material these 2 points are identical, we can say within the elastic limit of a material, the stresses produced in a material is directly proportional to strain. So mathematically we can write it as sigma is directly proportional to epsilon, or we can say engineering stresses, since we are calculating this on the basis of initial value of cross sectional area and initial value of gauge length. So we can say sigma E is directly proportional to epsilon E. So if you want to remove this constant of proportionality sign, it will be actually equal to some constant, we call it as E into epsilon E, which is a mathematical form of Hooke's law. And E is nothing but it is the elastic modulus or Young's modulus of a material. And its unit will be the same as that of stresses, right? So stresses is either it will be stresses is in pascals or megapascals or in GPa. So elastic modulus also follows the same unit as that of stresses, because here strains is a dimensionless quantity. It has, since this is just the ratio of two lengths, so the units of length will cancel out each other. That is the reason strain is oftenly treated as a dimensionless quantity. So elastic modulus, alternatively this we also call as Young's modulus, right? We also call this as Young's modulus, and this is one of the most important mechanical property of a material. It is the intrinsic property of a material. Now the question is, sir, you will ask me, what do we mean by the term elastic modulus? This is the intrinsic mechanical property of a material, and it is oftenly used in designing the materials which are assumed to behave within the elastic limit. So elastic modulus is a very important property. All right. Now, what do this elastic modulus represents? See, this is the internal resistance of a material against the applied load. That is what actually is the physical significance of elastic modulus. Okay. So from 0 to 2, we have got a elastic region. Okay. Now, so let us save this and continue this on next page. So let us say this is P3. I will share these notes to everyone in case anybody or any of the subscribers of mine need these notes. So please email to me. My email is already given in my profile. So you can just put a request message in the comments box with your email ID. So I will surely share all these notes to you as a PDF. Okay. So let us continue with this further discussion. And let me just rub only these things. Okay. So from point 2 to 3, from point 2 to 3, we actually goes to a region. Actually, it is not 2 to 3, it is actually 2 to 4. This is a yielding region. We call this region as the yielding region. Okay. We call this as yielding region. If you just draw this, just drop a perpendicular line here. Let me use another sketch. From point 2 to 4, we call this as yielding. We call this as yielding. Okay. Now, what do we mean by the term yielding, or what do we mean by yielding region? Now, as we have reached the elastic limit of the material, or as our load has been reached here in the tension test, what will happen if you further increase the load value and you cross this elastic limit point? Which means that we have now crossed the elastic limit. Theoretically, we have actually crossed the elastic limit of a material. Now, as soon as it reaches the point 3, so there is an inevitable permanent breakdown of a material. So there is inevitable breakdown of a material. Okay. There is inevitable breakdown of a material. Now, this inevitable breakdowns of a material doesn't denote the complete failure of a material. It actually represents that the deformation that is being produced in these specimens, once it has crossed elastic limit and it has reached point number 3, that deformation is actually permanent. So which means that there is some sort of permanent strain that is being produced in a material, which means that theoretically from this, if you remove the load and you just try to unload it, it will not follow this line. Instead it will follow some sort of this line. So if you see from this, from 0 to let us say point number A, so there is some sort of permanent strain that is already being produced in this specimen. So we call this strain as permanent strain, and sometimes we call this strain as residual strain also. So this is the onset of the permanent deformation of a material, and this onset of the permanent deformation we call this as yielding. Okay, which means, or we can say the specimen has yielded, or more simply we can say the specimen has entered into the plastic deformation stage. Now what is plastic deformation? A plastic deformation is an irreversible deformation, which means whenever you try to remove it, whenever you just try to unload the specimen will not follow the original loaded path. Okay, so this is the meaning of plastic deformation in a material. So this is what we call it as yielding of a material. Now under what happens, see, as you reach to point number 3, what happens here, actually the material try to adjust its molecular structure due to this permanent deformation. So due to this type of adjustment in their molecular structure, what happens, either the load, actually practically for most of the metallic materials, the load actually decreases to some small value till it reaches another point, let us say 4 dash. So that point we call it as lower yield point. Okay, so that point we call it as lower yield point. But here what happens, although the load may continue to decrease, but there will be the permanent deformation, or we can say there will be a strain that will be producing in the specimen itself. Now as soon as it reaches its point number 4, or we can say point 4 dash, let us say, okay, let us represent this as in this way. Let us say this point as 4 dash, or we call this point as 4. Now this reduction in load is so small that this can almost assume to be a straight line. But for most of the material, you can you can study the behavior in this way, and you call that point 4 dash as lower yield point. But since we are talking about a steel material, it will actually, the decrease in load will be very substantial, or we can say very small. So this can be neglected, and we can almost assume it as a straight line. So it reaches its point number 4. Now at the point number 4, the material has completely adjusted its molecular structure. Now as you further increase the load from point 4 to 5, we call that region as strain hardening region. We call that region as the strain hardening region. Now what happens under this region? See, here the material try to adjust its molecular structure due to the sudden permanent deformation that is being induced here. So in order to, now as soon as you further increase the load in the tensile testing machine, the specimen will again try to regain the load after it adjusted its molecular structure, which means that at this point our yielding has actually completely ended. So any further increase is load here is actually supported by a curve that rises continuously in this way. Okay, so the specimen has started taking up a load in a in a continuous fashion. So that is the reason we are getting a continuously rise curve, and it becomes flat until it reaches point number 5. Now this point number 5 is the maximum capacity of a specimen that carries a particular amount of a load. So that value of load or stresses that a material can withstand, maximum amount of load or stresses that a material actually can withstand before showing any visible sign of failure, we call that point as sigma UTS, or we call this as ultimate tensile strength of a material. And this is a very important mechanical property of a material, which is oftenly used in design calculations for materials against plastic deformations. Okay, so this is ultimate tensile strength. So theoretically on the curve, what we can do, see, from point number 4 to 5, from point number 4 to 5, we call this as strain hardening region. Okay, strain hardening means a curve shows a continuous rise with almost a constant slope, with a constant steep slope till it reaches maximum point. So that process we call it as strain hardening, and later on we will see, when we will come on to our further lectures, we will see that this strain hardening plays a very important role in designing materials against severe plastic deformations. So this plays a very important role. So strain hardening. So this is a strain hardening region. Now region, let me save this. We continue our discussion on the next page. Let us say this is P4. Okay, fine. Let me rub this for timing here. Okay, see, just try to see now. From here, region 5 to 6. region 5 to 6, we call it as knacking and failure point. Or we can say fracture point. Okay. Now, see what happens in this region. As we have already seen in the strain hardening region that the material has already reached, has already taken the maximum load, or it has actually reached its maximum capacity. Now beyond, if you further increase the value, what is going to happen? The specimen will elongate. Due to that load, though the specimen may elongate, but there will be you will observe a sharp reduction in the cross-sectional area of the specimen in this region. As soon as your load level crosses this value, and if you further increase the load, you will see that the specimen will elongate, but it will be accompanied by a sharp reduction in its cross-sectional area. It will be accompanied by sharp reduction in its cross-sectional area. Okay, in its cross-sectional area, there will be a sharp reduction in the cross-sectional area, which means that this failure actually takes place in the gauge length of a specimen. Now the question is, how do it looks like? It actually looks like this. Let me draw this cylindrical specimen. This is the actual specimen before test. Now as you are increasing the load here, it will actually follows a type of knacking. It will actually follows a type of reduction area in this, and this reduction area is followed by a process we call it as knacking. So that is a region, we call this region as knacking region, because there is a reduction in the cross sectional area like this, right? Now actually alternatively we can say this reduction in the cross sectional area is actually a local, it becomes localized, which means this cross-sectional area will continue to reduce till it confined to a small point, and that finally that small point is divides this material into two parts, and ultimately it reaches the material reaches at point number 6, and finally it divides the material into two parts, or we can say the material get fractured. So this is fracture is a localized deformation due to the reduction in the cross-sectional area of this material. Okay, now, so that is a reason, due to the reduction in area, any further increased load is actually shown by reduction here, but though the stresses will continue to increase here. So these type of failure in ductile materials is, we call it as normally cup and cone fracture. We call this as cup and cone fracture. So this is a failure of a ductile material. So this cup and cone fracture is often accompanied by a process we call it as knacking, which is nothing but this is a localized reduction of a cross-sectional area to a single point inside a material. So if we just name it mathematically, just try to rub this. So we name this curve as, let us say, we name this curve as knacking. See, we have already seen that from point number 3, it has started, there is a permanent deformation that is being induced in this specimen. So from point number 3, oftenly we can say from point number 2, because this is the irreversible deformation. So from point number 2 to 6, this complete region is actually known as plastic deformation, or we can say this, since this is, we have plotted strain, so we can say plastic strain also. This is the elastic strain, we call this as epsilon E, and this is the plastic deformation, or we can say plastic strain, we represent this as epsilon P. Which means that for a ductile material, please remember this, this is a very important result. For a ductile material, please see this. For a ductile material, the total strain that is being produced at the fracture point, let us say epsilon total, is nothing but it is the individual contributions of elastic strain plus plastic strain. So this is a very important equation. The total strain inside a ductile material is divided into two terms, epsilon E and epsilon P. See, later on in our coming lectures, we will see that this epsilon E component of strain, we call it as hydrostatic strain, hydrostatic component of strain. We call it as hydrostatic. This is due to the hydrostatic component of stresses. Okay. This is hydrostatic, and epsilon P, we call it as deviatoric. Now, what do you mean by this term deviatoric and hydrostatic? Hydrostatic means there will be a change in the dimensions of a body. Now as the body is actually changing its dimensions, so there will be a volume change. So any stresses which represents the volume change in a body, and there are those volumetric strains which are associated with these component of stresses, we call it as hydrostatic strains. Similarly, those components of strains which actually distorts the body, which only changes the shape of a body, but it does not change the volume of a body. So that component we call it as deviatory component. Actually, it is the shear components. The main process is the shear. So we will discuss it some other time. So under deviatoric stresses, your volume will be constant. But in case of hydrostatic component, volume there is always a volume change. So we'll see that normal stresses are due to the so we will see that hydrostatic components are due to the normal component of stresses, and deviatory component are due to the shear stresses components. Okay, fine. Let us end our discussion here, and we will continue how we can derive various mechanical properties using this stress strain curve. So any questions about this stress strain curve, please put your questions in the comment box, or you can individually also email me if in case you need any note. Thank you as of now, and we'll continue our discussion in the next lecture. Thank you.